Well, a very good afternoon to you, or good morning, or for some of you, it's a good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from all around the world. My name is Natalie Ashdown. Welcome to the Coaching Cafe. And I'm joined on the line today by the fabulous Paula Jones Hunt and Bridget Calvert. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Or it's really afternoon, isn't it? But anyway,
Yeah.
we are discussing ethics in coaching today, and it's our second part of our two-part series. So last week we talked about the core values, the ICF Code of Conduct and the ICF core values. And today we're thinking about what is an instant fail in the performance evaluation of an ICF performance exam. So we are thinking about the ICF core competencies, and we're going to dig into, well, what would mean that you actually fail the exam? And welcome to you all from all around the world. We've got people dialing from Singapore, from America, India, down the road, in Melbourne, over in Canberra, Mumbai, all around our world today. And as part of that, we acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians on the lands on which we're all meeting today, and their continuing connection to the lands, the waters, and the communities of Australia, and the lands from all around the world where you might be joining us from today. Whether you are listening to this live via our webinar or listening to this on your favourite streaming service, we pay our respects to them and to elders past, present, and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities from around the world. So as I mentioned today, we're going back to our ICF core competencies. That's our theme for the next couple of weeks. In the lead up to International Coach Week, we're really digging into our own self-reflection and thinking about our coaching practice. And today, a follow on from last week, as I mentioned, we're looking at demonstrates ethical practice, which is the first core competency actually within the new core competencies. And as I mentioned, we'll take a look at what does an instant fail mean in a performance evaluation. Whether you're an ACC, a PCC, or an MCC, these are the things we need to be watching out for. If you're new to the Coaching Cafe, welcome. We are all about sharing learned experiences, having thought-provoking conversations like this one, and we do make free ICF CCEUs available at the end. If you're a regular, welcome back. You know, we always love connecting with you on Friday, or if you're listening to our podcast, of course, we love that you're listening to us. So thank you very much for joining us. So we've been talking about the ICF Code of Ethics, which are underpinned by the ICF core values. And today, as I mentioned, we really want to dig into the core competency number one, demonstrates ethical practice. And I've given you the link there. You can simply go to the coachfederation.org, type in credentials and standards. You can look at the performance evaluations and minimum skills requirements, or you can simply type in ICF core competencies and you'll pull up this information. If you'd like to interact with us, please do pop a message into the chat box and we'll pick up your messages, we'll pick up your comments, and we'll also pick up your questions as we go along. For those of you that are looking to re-credential as well, you do have to have 2 ethics webinars as part of your re-credentialing, and yes, these 2 webinars do count towards that too. So we're really knocking off and ticking a lot of boxes with our webinars over the last 2 weeks. So I've taken this straight out of the core competencies. And one interesting thing to note is that prior to the new core competencies being released, it was kind of a given. Ethical practice and demonstrating ethical practice was across the core competencies. It wasn't really highlighted as an actual core competency, if that makes sense. It was kind of a given. It was written there as part of the core competencies. But now what they've done with the new core competencies is made it actually number one. So the definition is that the coach understands and consistently applies coaching ethics and standards and the standards of coaching. Now, they point out 7 different things, and it's a bit wordy on the slide, so I'll read them out for those people that are listening at home as well and might be listening on your favourite streaming service. What we're talking about here is that the coach demonstrates personal integrity and honesty in interactions with clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders. Now, this clients, that's not new, but the sponsors and relevant stakeholders is an excellent addition to the core competency here. That the client is sensitive, the coach is sensitive to the client's identity, their environment, their experiences, values, and beliefs. And again, we've noticed the inclusion of identity, values, and beliefs, which is a great inclusion. They use a language appropriate and respectful to the clients, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders, again, acknowledging that sometimes more than one person than just the client is involved in the coaching relationship. The coach abides by the ICF Code of Ethics and upholds the core values, as we discussed last week, and we had a great opportunity for reflective practice last week. That the coach maintains confidentiality with client information per stakeholder agreements and pertinent laws. That's absolutely a given. Maintains the distinction between coaching, consulting, psychotherapy, and other professional services. Now, this is a very, very important inclusion, and this is why I've asked Bridget in particular as our ICF assessor, as our performance evaluation assessor for our Certificate 4 and our Diploma of Organisational Coaching. And Bridget is also a trained assessor with the International Coach Federation. So this inclusion that we're maintaining the distinction between coaching, consulting, psychotherapy, and other support professionals gives you a hint as to why a fail might occur, but it's a very important inclusion because it was not there before. And it's ensuring that people understand their role as a coach and stay in the role as a coach. And the seventh one there is refers clients to other support professionals as appropriate. And interestingly, when we did our renewal of our Certificate 4 in Workplace and Business Coaching 5 years ago now, we're about to renew again, we're in that process. Thank you to everyone who's answered the survey for us. When we did our renewal 5 years ago, we actually included referrals to other support services as appropriate. So potentially also making a referral from a mental health first aid point of view. So we're very pleased that 5 years ago we included that in our program. And then of course COVID happened, etc. And mental health first aid and the need for mental health first aid, which was around beforehand, obviously really took off during that time as well. But we know that as coaches, we have the opportunity to make referrals as well. So a very important inclusion in the ethics as well here. So our topic today is really to do that reflective practice and say, well, if we are applying for an ACC, a PCC, or an MCC credential, or if we are during our normal coaching practice as ICF professionals, as professional coaches. So I always say professional coaches, whether you are an ICF credentialed coach or not, if you are calling yourself as a coach, as far as I'm concerned, you're calling yourself a professional coach, then we need to think about, first of all, that we're demonstrating alignment with the ICF Code of Ethics in any coaching demonstration, but particularly in the performance evaluation. So if you are submitting your recordings for your Certificate 4 or your diploma, you really need to make sure that we're in line with those code of ethics, which of course you will be, but it's great to have that reflection. An applicant who commits a clear violation of the code of ethics, which we have discussed, within a performance evaluation recording would not pass this competency and would be denied a credential. So I really do like that this is step number one. You need to be demonstrating ethics across the board. And if you don't, then that would be a denial of a credential. Now, of course, in the wild west of coaching years and years ago, when everyone could call themselves a coach, this was much more of an issue. The people were calling themselves a coach, but they weren't necessarily demonstrating ethical practice. So I'm very pleased actually with the new core competencies that that's all been sorted out. And as I keep repeating myself, it is a given, but it's very important for self-reflection. Bridget, Paula, I'm going to throw to you just at this point, and then we'll get into more detail as well. But thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I just want to add to, of course, that the competency number one, that demonstrating ethical practice alongside the coaching mindset, is actually the foundation core competency. So it is really, really important. I see the word fail there, and it's part of what we're talking about today. But as we know, there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback, of course. So, when I'm listening to those recordings and giving that feedback, it is really, really important to be really clear around that distinction between the coaching, the mentoring, the managing or counselling. And we talk about that in our Certificate 4 as well. But really, really important to stay in that coaching, keep that coaching hat on when you're doing your recordings?
Yeah, it's important. I know there's a lot of very experienced coaches on the line, and you will be called to do other things, including mostly mentoring.
Mm.
So that's where the client actually wants that mentoring from you. The majority of the time, though, we're staying in a coaching space. We're not trying to do mentoring. And it is a warning, I suppose, though, isn't it, Bridge, that if someone does kick into mentoring during their coaching demonstrations with ourselves, and in particular that final performance evaluation, then we would have to give that feedback, and they would have to do another recording.
Yeah, and I think that you know, we know that in the workplace you will be wearing different hats at different times, you know, and that whilst I would say, you know, ask a question first and put your coaching hat on first, there will be times where mentoring is appropriate and you know, managing and whatnot. But when we're submitting our recordings, it's important to demonstrate your coaching skill. So that's what I'm listening for, even though we recognise that in the workplace, you may be wearing different hats at different times, but what I want to hear is your coaching skill.
Yeah, thank you. And let's have a bit more of a deeper dive here. I've got a couple of slides for you, and people can feel free to take a screenshot if you like. But I want to underline, so this comes straight out of the performance evaluation. You can pick this up on ICF's website. It's a very good reminder as far as I'm concerned. And what we are talking about here is that at any level of credentials, so ACC, PCC, and MCC, sometimes more experienced coaches, I find, do more mentoring. So we're saying draw back, come back to that, particularly in the performance evaluation. An applicant must also remain consistently in the role of a coach within a performance evaluation, and that's exactly what we've been talking about. This includes demonstrating a knowledge of the coaching conversation that is focused on inquiry and exploration and focused on present and future issues. So, Paula, I know you are our explorer. You love those terminologies: inquiry, explanation, present, and future. Did you want to just comment on that a little bit just before we tell people how they would not pass?
Yeah, and it kind of links in with what Bridget was saying about staying in that coaching space. And having been a practitioner who was a subject matter expert within organizations, and having that coaching approach in the style that I had, it is very easy to jump out of coaching and move back into others. It takes a lot to practice and focus in staying in as a coach, and it all comes down to that inquiry and explanation. If you stay in that space where you are asking lots of great questions to gather more information, even if you have to pop out, so for me, I might have to pop out of coaching to provide legal, you know, how does that relate to the Fair Work Act, for example. Even when it relates to the Fair Work Act, it then comes back to, so now that we know that information, how would you like to move forward with that? So it's about popping out if you're outside of it, but then popping back into the inquiry and exploration. But I guess that relates to when you're working in-house. It's not necessarily when you're doing your performance evaluation or a straight coaching session that's specifically designed. But yeah, that focusing on what more information does that person have that they didn't know that they have that they can bring out?
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. Thank you, Paula. And you talk about taking your hat off and the coaching HR hat off. That's a very, very good example, actually, where you might take your coaching hat off to give legal implications, Fair Work Act, for example, but then you're putting the coaching hat on to then have the person reflect on what you've actually said. The other important distinction is, of course, if that's in a performance evaluation, we wouldn't be doing that. But it's a very good practical application of what actually happens in the workplace. Go on, Bridget. Did you want to jump in as well?
Oh, yes. And I was just going to say that piece about having your coaching hat on. And there have been, you know, a recording or two in the past where, you know, I've heard in that recording, oh, I'm just going to take my coaching hat off now because I really want to tell you what I did with. And, you know, stating that you're going to take your coaching hat off is not enough to recognise that you're not coaching. You actually have to leave that at the door and make sure that we're staying in that coaching role whilst we're doing our demonstrations.
Yes, I remember those examples myself, Bridget, and I remember I needed to listen to the recording as well to back up what we were saying, because the person was very unhappy that they had to resubmit another recording because they said that they were coaching, and we said yes, but at this time stamp you weren't coaching because you said you weren't coaching. So it was a bit of a tricky one, which we worked through. But yes, I do remember that one. And thank you to those people who are saying that this is very helpful and they're getting clarity. And thank you, Sonali and Peter. You're saying you appreciate the classifications. They're most available to me. So we are thinking about that. Thank you. So it does say that an applicant would not pass the competency, which really, I think, wow, you're actually saying I'm not passing the competency of demonstrating ethical practice if I'm primarily focused on telling the client what to do or how to do it. And then I think, well, that's right, because that's not the ethical practice of a coach. So if you're in consulting mode, telling the client what to do and how to do it, or if the conversation is based primarily in the past, particularly the emotional past, so if people go into a therapeutic mode, a counseling mode, or some other therapeutic mode. So I like it that the ICF have made it very clear, actually, that this is what coaching is and this is not coaching. So the ICF is making very clear that if you did this in a performance evaluation, this would not be it would be an instant fail, would not be a pass.
And I think it's important to add,
go on, Bridge. Yeah.
add there, Nat, too. This is why we focus our attention in the Cert 4 course around leading questions and avoiding leading questions, because the leading questions can very much sound like you're telling somebody what to do or leading them down a particular path, or, you know, subliminally trying to give them advice around something. So really, really important to keep those questions open and curious.
That's an excellent point, actually, because people are thinking that they're coaching, but they are leading in a way that's trying to tell the person what they want to do. And I found myself, even in a coaching conversation yesterday, I actually said, you know what, it's not my role to tell you what to do. So I was just clarifying with the client that I was coaching that it's not my role to jump here and tell you what to do or how to do it. What I'm wondering is, and the question was around, how can you make that more realistic? How can you lay out a plan so that it's actually achievable and not overwhelming, which is what we've been talking about. So I'm not telling her what to do. I'm asking that quality question to find out how she can actually lay out a plan that is going to be achievable. Great. Well, there's a couple more things to talk about as well. So that is the telling, the how to, and the focus on the past, or the emotional or therapeutic past. We've got a couple of other examples here as well. Just waiting for that flick of a slide, Paula. Have you got it there?
Oh, I did click it. Did it not?
Did it not come up? Here we go. That's it. Got it. Thank you. So the next one is around at any level of credential, as we've talked about. Again, reminding experienced coaches to come back to your core here. If an applicant is not clear on the basic foundation of exploration and evoking skills that underline the ICF definition of coaching, that lack of clarity in skill use will be reflected in a skill level demonstration in some of the other core competencies listed below. So let's get very clear about this. What they're talking about is that if the coach almost exclusively gives advice or indicates that a particular answer chosen by the coach is what the client should do. So this is where, if the coach says, oh, this is what I think you should do, or gives advice, or the other thing I think is the particular thing we have to watch out for is if the coach says, so the client comes up with the idea but the coach says, oh, that's a great idea. I really think you should go and do that. That sounds great to me. So anything that's in that kind of weird telling, advising, telling the coach what they should do space is also a breach of trust and safety, presence, active listening, evoking awareness, and facilitating client growth. All of those things won't be present, and at any credential, it would be denied. So, Bridget, jump on in here. I mean, we wouldn't do it. It's kind of we wouldn't do this. It for me. It's kind of like, oh, but that's not coaching. But this is why we need to reflect and have another good think about it.
Well, that's right. I mean, exploration and evoking skills, you know, in the spirit of what coaching is. Of course, you know, when we ask a really open and curious question, we are placing trust in that person that they have the answers within. We're building that rapport and that trust with that person by doing that, rather than telling them what to do, which could subliminally suggest we don't trust that they have the answer, you know, and that perhaps, you know, what we have to say is a better idea or what have you. So trust and safety is really, really important when it comes to exploration and evoking skills. Being present and actively listening, of course, and being able to evoke awareness from your coachee through that open and curious question. And of course, facilitating that client growth. We all know what it's like, as I say this in Cert 4, we all know what it's like when we're told what to do, and sometimes things can go in one ear and out the other. But essentially, when we discover for ourselves that feeling that we get when we thought, oh, you know, I figured that out for myself, and you remember those things really, really well. So all of that contributes, that exploration and evoking skills, all of that contributes to those particular core competencies.
I think the thing that really stands out for me for what you shared there, Bridget, thank you, is that we don't trust them to have the answer. What a powerful thing to think about when we're coaching. We trust the clients to find the answer from within. So if you're in the workplace and you feel like you need to give advice, tell the person what to do, then does that then mean that you don't trust them? And it's a very good reflective point as well. Some great comments coming through. Roberta, thank you, has said an innocent response such as, that's a great idea, may be seen as judgmental as well, even though we don't mean it that way. And Roberta, thank you for sharing that, because and I don't mind saying, because people do know, I actually failed an MCC exam. So one of the performance evaluations that I put in for my MCC, I did fail because they thought that I was overly enthusiastic. And when you listen back to the transcript, I did say something like that. That's a great idea. Now, not meaning that's a great idea, go and do it, but judging the ideas as good or bad is not MCC coaching. So that was a very good lesson for me. So that's why we're having this conversation as well.
And at the same time, I'd just like to add there too, we don't want to be robotic in our responses.
Yes, that's right.
We do want to be enthusiastic and you know, we're focused 100% on that person, and we want to conspire for their success. So we just need to be mindful of the balance.
Absolutely. Yes. So that was very funny. Actually, I did another recording which was removed of all enthusiasm, and that was just like a test recording, and I failed that one as well because they said, oh, it seemed like you weren't present, it seemed like you didn't have any connection, or you weren't active listening, and I'm like, well, I was just trying not to be enthusiastic. So anyway, we have to balance it, don't we? Yeah. And Brittany says she mentors, you mentor newbie coaches, and it comes up a lot. They believe that sharing opinions or advice is okay. Oh, actually said they believe they aren't sharing opinions or advice, but they certainly are. Yeah. Tips on balancing how to do that well. Yeah, that's a good question as well.
Yeah. And I think the key distinction is, that's a great idea, you should go ahead and do it. The go ahead and do it part is clearly the piece, I suppose, that you would want to avoid. But saying things like, great, it sounds like you've, you know, chosen some really great options there. or it sounds like you're happy with the pathway you're taking. You're staying out of the space, but you're acknowledging what that person's chosen to do, or an idea that they've come up with. It's just being, I guess, thoughtful around the comments that you make and taking a moment to think about what you're going to say before you say it, whether that's a question or an observation or a comment that you're going to make. Just taking a moment first and saying, is what I'm about to say judgmental in any way, or perhaps leading someone down a particular path, or giving my opinion? Yeah, it's just staying out of the space, practicing that staying out of the space so that we can compute what we're going to say.
I think also, Bridget, I agree with you. It's also related to staying out of the space. It is watching those still words. So we go, great, great, or wonderful, or, so we have to be authentic in terms of our enthusiasm, our connection, and our engagement. But too much of it starts to almost sound that the client is trying to please the coach, which is also not part of our ethical practice either. So we just got to watch that we are not overly enthusiastic, that it turns into a bit of a power imbalance, I suppose. So one other tip that I had was in that regards is I say to the coachee, sounds like we're building momentum with these options, or you've identified 3 or 4 or 5 options, which is great momentum, which has got us some great momentum. So rather than say it's great, to judge it as good or bad, I describe what's happening. And what's happening in the coaching conversation is that this is giving us momentum. It's now we're really starting to unpick it or dive in or think about things a bit more deeply. And so I'm really focused on trying to describe the process that we're exploring and what's happening. Like, it sounds like we're really trying to explore this, or we're really exploring this now, digging in deeper, are really nice ways of getting you out of that kind of basic over enthusiasm as well.
Sure. And just to wrap up on that piece too, I think when we're checking in on actions that people have, taken between last time we've seen them and this time, you want to be enthusiastic and recognize that they've achieved something and congratulate them. So remember that piece too.
Of course, it's being authentic, isn't it? And I'm genuinely really excited and happy for the person. What I was told to do is to say, I'm genuinely excited and really happy for you. So, probably use more words to describe what's happening. And that's being authentic as well. So that's good. Thank you, Paula. We're right on time here, but we've got one more thing to share. Oh, no, that's it. So as part of our practice and our reflective practice, as I said, particularly in the lead up to International Coach Week, we really do encourage you to go back and read the ICF core competencies. Read this demonstrates ethical practice, competency number 1, and we encourage you to take the time for your own reflective practice as well. And thanks, Roberta. You said you love the suggestion about being aware that you don't overuse filler words. I am notorious for that. Wonderful, great. Oh, that sounds, So I actually had to work on cutting all of that out. And in doing so, I'm more closely aligned with the ICF core competencies because I've done that. So yeah, thank you. Great. Well, thanks everyone for a really interesting conversation. Thank you, Bridget and Paula, for jumping in. We have team coaching. We have our Cert 4, our diploma of coaching. We're doing a lot of executive and senior leadership one-on-one coaching at the moment, and we have been offering mediation services for a long time, but not a lot of people know about that. So just mentioning that to you as well, that's available if you've got conflict going on that we can help you with. Thanks everyone for jumping in and saying that you think it's valuable. We really appreciate that. As always, we say enjoy your coaching. Thank you for joining us all around the world. We love you joining us and listening to us on the podcast as well. So thank you. Enjoy your coaching.